Welcome on behalf of Savage Content. We are here with Sullivan Fortner and Warren Wolf, and we are going to get right into the heart of their jazz experience. But before we get into that, I really want to start because I know you grew up in Baltimore, you're from New Orleans. What did your home sound like when you were growing up? What were your parents or siblings listening to?
You want to start this?
Yeah, I can start that. So I was born in 1979. So my parents, they were like huge fans of Motown.
Nice.
That was their era, you know. So I heard a lot of, Temptations, Delphonics, Smokey, Michael Jackson 5.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
All of those great groups. And but that was mainly like as a couple for my parents. Mm-hmm. Now then my dad as a solo, when he would, be in the basement playing his own records, he would play things but like Stanley Torrentine, Rory Ayers. He was all about soul jazz, stuff that had a beat. And every now and then he would play like traditional jazz, Miles Davis, maybe Charlie Parker. But it was for the most part, like his main guy was Rory Ayers. He was like, that's the guy I want to listen to. And then I have two older sisters. Okay. So they also play a big part in my musical development, not teaching me anything, but as far as what I was listening to.
Sure.
So my older sister is 9 years older than me, and the other one is maybe 5 years older. Okay. So hanging around them was my early introduction to hip hop. Okay. So I used to really like that movie Crush Groove back in the day. Oh, yeah. So I was really listening to Fat Boys, Run DMC, New Edition, In Vogue, and groups like that. So it was a combination of all of these styles of music that was being played around the house that really got me interested in music for the most part. But my dad, number one, was the main person to get me started in jazz and classical and popular music. Okay. To be honest, I thought I was going to be a classical musician coming up.
Really?
Yeah. Jazz was hard.
It is. It was. Classical is not easy.
It's not, but when reading notes is one thing.
Right. Making them up is different.
Making them up is different and connecting the dots. But, what we used to do, he would play like a violin concerto like on cassette tape.
I remember
and we had the music, yes. And he would say, just play along with it. So eventually my reading got really good. I'm kind of jumping over the story, but, just classical was a big part of me coming up.
Sure. So, did you have a favorite classical composer?
I had to think it was probably Bach or Vivaldi.
Gotta love Vivaldi.
I used to love both of those. They didn't make many pieces for the instrument that I was playing. Not vibes, but marimba. Right. So... But my teacher had me do at the time, I would play pieces that were performed on the violin or flute or piccolo because the register of both of those instruments pretty much match the marimba. Okay. So it was easier to go about it that way.
All right. That makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. And what were you listening to at home?
Well, my mom and my mom's side of the family was very, very heavy in the church. Okay. So I grew up listening to basically all kind of choir music.
The Clara Ward singers and all that?
Not that late.
Not that late.
Like going into like Mississippi Mass Choir, LA Mass Choir, all the mass choirs from the different states. Okay. They had records and, of course, Edwin and Walter Hawkins, Andre Crouch, and those Take Six. Yeah. Those were some of my upbringings from my mom. And then my dad... was really heavy. Well, he was born in the 60s, so his era was like, he played music all the way from the Spinners and, the Motown stuff, like he says, going all the way up to like Babyface and Anita Baker and Tony Braxton and, stuff. Yes. He was like a real R&B guy. He really loved R&B music. So those were the two sides that I kind of came in to music. And then later on in high school, I started listening to jazz kind of on my own. Oh, okay. And my parents didn't like jazz or classical music. That wasn't the music in our house.
Do you remember how you discovered jazz?
Well, I have a cousin that plays saxophone. Oh. And he teaches music in New Orleans, a guy named Stephen Foster. And he kind of gave us little things, you know, a couple of, you know, street beat music, and this stuff that was happening in New Orleans, and then he would throw in a couple Duke Ellington pieces. Okay. You know, every now and then, like, you know, A-Train.
Yeah.
You know, I remember him doing giving us Horace Silver one time, you know, but I wasn't really into it, you know, because it wasn't stuff that I was playing all the time.
Sure.
And then around the high school time, there was this guy that came to the church. He was playing organ, and he just went through all the styles. He started playing Latin music, started playing classical and jazz. I was like, I want to play like that.
Yeah.
He was like, well, you need to go to New Orleans Center for Creative Arts.
Huh.
So I applied. And I played a hymn at the audition, and I got in, and that was my introduction to jazz.
That's amazing.
Wow.
So, you guys had such diverse backgrounds in music. Do you remember when you did start to develop your own musical taste, what the first record was that you bought, or CD or cassette?
For jazz music?
No, for whatever. Like, what was the first thing when you were like at that high school age that you were like, I want this CD? Do you remember? Or like any particular artist that you were really listening to?
If I had to really think back then, so Antonio Hart.
Okay.
Antonio, who is currently the chair of jazz at Queens College.
Sure.
He used to live around the corner from me.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So he was in my dad's first band.
Wow.
So one thing my dad and I used to do all the time when we would finish practicing, we would always play games of pool, you know, billiards. And I would always throw on Antonio's first record. It was on this label called Novus. It's titled For the First Time. And it would always be a mix of either playing that record or this record by Spiral Gyra called Morning Dance.
Oh my gosh, Spiral Gyra.
Well, there's a reason behind that because, see, at the time, my teacher who at Berkeley was actually in Spiral Gyra at the time, which was the late great Dave Samuels.
Yeah.
And we used to always play this tune called, again, the title track, Morning Dance. But Antonio Hart's record, that was the one that kind of did it for me. And, you know, that's really right there, that's how it really made me start to get more into jazz because of the players he had on that record. So at the time, let's say on that record, it was a very young Christian McBride. I think Christian was 18 years old.
Oh my gosh.
Late Margaret Miller on piano, Lewis Nash, the late great Rory Hargrove was on 2 tracks, Billy Pierce, and a guy named Tom Williams. I didn't know who any of these guys were.
But you've gone on to play with many of them.
I have. But I didn't know them at first. I was just like, who are these kids? You know, they're not kids, but you know, Kelly.
Yeah.
And I remember, to answer your question, first record, I was like, this is mine. So I remembered those names on the record. I was like, these guys know a play. So I remember me and my mom, we were at the store, and I just happened to go to the jazz section. I didn't know anybody in there. But I was like, Christian McBride. I remember this name from that Antonio Hart record.
Right.
And I was like, Mom, can I buy this? She said, yeah, pick it up. And, you know, I just started diving more into it because when I looked at the, you know, how on the back of the CDs back in the day, we could see the names.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, Lewis Nash is on this record. And here's his record, I Get Into It. That's his debut on Verve. I was like, wait, the same drummer's on that, Lewis Nash. And I was like, let me keep listening to him. Cyrus Chestnut.
Oh, yeah.
Rory Hargrove again, and then Joshua Redman. You know, I didn't know who any of these guys was.
Yes,
you know?
but even though a lot of them were sidemen, they were still like so equally important, obviously collaboratively with the music.
Yeah.
But even in terms of influence, it's not always about who's standing out in front.
Definitely. And that really helped me a lot. I mean, again, it was a history lesson for me.
Yeah, for sure.
The last one other track that was actually your dad was on that record.
Really?
yeah, he played on 2 tracks on that record.
That's so funny.
But there was another track, a bass trio, where he had Ray Brown and Milt Hinton.
Oh wow.
I thought Ray Brown at that time and Milt Hinton were just young guys.
Oh, you didn't know?
I didn't know, but you know, I had to start doing research. I was like, wow, Ray
we
Brown
didn't have
played
Google
on
back
this.
then.
That's right. Yeah, like
You had to go to the library.
I had to go to the library and sign on, and it took forever to interrupt somebody's phone line. You know.
Yeah. I remember that.
Yeah.
I remember that. But you kind of glossed over your dad's band. What can you tell us a little bit more about your dad's band?
So my dad, he was not a professional musician. He was he's still with us, but he's a retired history teacher. He taught United States and world history in schools. Wow. He's a former Vietnam. He's a Vietnam veteran.
Amazing.
And he started teaching, but I think the year I was born in '79, but he also loved music. Yeah. So he decided to start a band with some friends around town. Sure. And his band pretty much, I mean, they were like the party band. Like the club in Baltimore that they would play, the first set started at 1 a.m. and they would play until 4. And they pretty much played, again, like Sullivan was saying, they played Anita Baker. Like they would start off with, Caught Up in the Rapture.
Oh, yes, please.
Those hits.
Yeah.
That whole album was a hit.
That whole record.
Yeah, the whole thing. It's rare that you can find an album like that where you can listen to the whole thing top to bottom and everything is flawless.
You know it
yes,
too.
Yes,
right.
yes.
But they played Anita Baker, they played Yellow Jackets, they played Spiral Gyra, and then when it was time to quote unquote swing, like Baltimore has this whole blues based thing, so they would play tunes like Sugar, Stolen Moments, Get That Hard Shuffle. Yeah. So, nobody was really trying to play giant stuff. That wasn't happening. It's like, no, let's make it feel good, play some blues.
Yeah, but that's great.
Yep, they play stuff like that, And
I can hear all of those influences in your playing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
That was important, I've always tried to play multiple styles. You never know who's listening. I try to appeal to a lot of people who might be listening to you. Let's play maybe like a ballad, play a popular song that's rearranged or something like that. I just try to switch it around many different instances.
Yeah, that's great. And it also makes it interesting for you, I'm sure.
Yes, it does. Keeps us fresh.
Yeah, you got to stay fresh. When you started, you said you went to that center and you were able to really start being introduced in jazz. Did you have a role model or a person there that sort of helped to guide you?
I had two really in particular in the jazz field. A guy named Clyde Kerr Jr., who basically was the trumpet teacher a lot of all of the modern guys that came like maybe in the 80s. So like he taught Terrence Blanchard, he taught Nicholas Payton, who was really, really influential to Nicholas Payton and Christian Scott, Irvin Mayfield.
Yeah.
And all of those people kind of came under his tutelage in some form. And the other one, my first piano teacher, Peter Martin.
Wow.
Yeah.
Pedro.
Yeah. And actually one of the first records I bought, which was Herbie Hancock, what was the Herbie Hancock record? Theme from Blow Up.
Yeah.
Was because Peter told me to listen to that record.
Wow.
And I was like, all right, well, I mean, I'm used to, because of church stuff, I just pick things up by ear, so I learned it really fairly quickly. He was like, okay, so he kept spitting out these records. He was telling me to, and then one day I was like, well, let me get a Peter Martin record, and then that kind of spin, that just took a life unto itself. Yeah.